Okay, moving on to the next operation, that is create. So we can go to the create.php file and we can start working on it. First what we need is to open a PHP tag. Include the same these two over here, and to include this. Okay, and we also need to include the footer. Okay, now if we go and create a hello world, this one, and come back over here, hit refresh and click the add new task button, we can see this hello world in the create.php file. So what we need to do here is we need to design this form and this layout before starting with the logic. So that's what we're going to do now. So first we're going to come back over here, get rid of this hello world. Okay, now what I'm going to do is we need the, first we need this heading with this back to task button. So for that I'm going to come to this index and copy this. Okay, and paste it over here, and don't forget to wrap this inside a container. Or what we can do is we can just go to the header and after the navbar we can open a container div, so that we don't have to open a container div in every page. Okay, and next we need to cut this and go to the footer and put it over here. Okay, and one more thing I forgot to do is we need to include this style.css and script in this header and footer. So let's do that before we forget. Okay, so for CSS what we need is link CSS and dot slash CSS slash styles. Style.css. Okay, and we need to go to the footer, and before the script we need to include the JavaScript file, so for that script src is equal to dot slash js slash script script dot js. Okay, so that's it, we have included the script. Now where we okay, we can change this CRUD basics to create new task. Okay, and we can add this button also. And instead of btn primary I'm going to give secondary, and you need to change this font awesome icon. So go to font awesome and search for icons, and I want an icon for the back. Or you can search for arrow. Okay, yeah, this is what we need. So I'm going to copy this, and instead of this plus icon I'm going to paste this over here. Now if we come back and refresh, you can see that the top section is ready. Now what we need is a form, so we can start building that form over here. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this form element inside a card. So first what I'm going to do is create a div and give it the bsy class name of card. Okay, and inside this card I'm going to give a card body. Alright, okay, inside this card body I'm going to define the form. This form mainly contains two input fields. One is the title, which is a required field, and a description, and it's not required. And we are not going to be using the validation that comes with the browser because that is not always safe. So in professional projects, what we do is we define the logic to validate the data that is that comes from the client side, from the server itself. So what we're going to do is I'm going to validate so that so the browser won't validate the form, and we can give a class for this form called needs validation so that we can validate it ourselves using this class later. So when the user submits this form, we're going to use the post method, and we need to, in the action parameter, I'm going to define the form submitting logic in the top side itself instead of creating a different file for it. So for that I need to call this create.php file itself. So for that, what we can do is we can PHP, we can echo special chars. That's it. We can start defining the input fields. Okay, so I'm going to open a div, and it's going to give a small margin bottom, and each label should have its own, each input field should have its own label. So first I'm going to define the label, and it's going to be for title, and it should have a class for Bootstrap 5 label, form label, a class, and that's it. I'm going to give the label class title, and since this is a required field, I'm going to give a span and put an asterisk over here, and this should have a class name of text danger to indicate that this is a required field. And now what we need is an input field. It's going to be a type of text, and it should have a class of form control, and I'm going to give an ID of title and a name of title itself. We also need to put this as required. Okay, and next what we need to do is we're going to write a script to validate this form, and just in case the input that is provided by the user is invalid, we need to show an error message to indicate to the user that this input is invalid. So I'm going to put that inside a div, okay. By default we're going to hide this and only show it when the user tries to hit submit without entering a proper title, etc. Okay, so that's it for the title section. Next we can move on to the description. Okay, I'm going to copy this label and paste it over here, and I'm going to remove this required, and it's going to be called just description. Okay, and it's going to be for description. Okay, now this is going to be a text area. Okay, and I'm going to give a class of form control, and we need an ID for description and a name for, and I'm going to give description itself. Okay, and by default I need to have 4 rows. 4 rows to have this height. Okay, so that's it. Since this is not an required field, we don't need this feedback. And lastly, what we can do is we can add a submit button there. Okay, I'm going to give it a margin at the top, and I'm going to put a button over here. The type equal to submit, and a class of btn primary, and I want it to be a large button, so it can be btn lg. Okay, inside this button I'm going to give the text of create task. Now if we come back and hit refresh, you can see this form over here. It's a bit wider than this one. Okay, and we need to increase the width of this button. So what we can do is we can just put a W100 over here, and that's it. And to reduce the width of this form, what we can do is we can come over here and put a style, inline style, and max width. And to centralize it, we can put the mx auto class over here, and if we refresh, we got this form. Okay, somewhat similar. And yeah, so that's it. If you want, we can add a icon to this button. So just come to Font Awesome and search for save. I'm going to copy this and paste this over here. Okay, so that's it. We have completed the design of the create form. Next, what we need to do is we need to add some logic, so that when the user adds a task and hit the create task button, it will be submitted and we can show it in this table. So for that, let's add some logic. So before we go to the logic part, what we need is we need to change this to index.php. So when we click this, we will be redirected back to the home page. Now if we click this add new task button here in this create.php file. Okay, now what we need to do is we need to add some logic over here. So if the user submits the form, we need to catch that request and validate the request and save the request. And just in case some error occurs, we need to catch that error and store it in the session so that we can show it to the user. So first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put an if condition. Okay, if the user is sending a post request, so for that we need to check server of request method. Okay, if this is equal to post, we need to handle the post request. So I'm going to open a try block over here to catch any error that might occur. So inside this try block, I'm going to put an if condition to validate if the user have included some title or not. So if empty of trim, inside here we need to put the name of this input field. Okay, If this condition is true, we need to throw a new exception. I'm going to call it task title is required. Okay. If the user has included a task title, what we need to do is we need to collect those data that the user has submitted in the form and store it in a variable. So there will be two things that the user has submitted. One will be a title, and to store it, I'm going to okay, and for the description, I'm going to paste the name of the description, and that's it. So we can do this, but this is not actually safe. Just in case the user submits some code through the form that might harm the database or the back server. So we need to sanitize the input that the user has submitted before saving it to the database. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call some functions. First we need to trim both these inputs, and then we're going to call another function called real escape string. If you want to know more about this real escape string, just hover over here. Okay, it's a string for the use in an SQL statement. Okay, so we can go through this information, just hover over it. Okay, so we need to call this function every time we are going to submit the data that comes from the user. Okay, now we have stored the title and description in a variable. What we can do is we can write an SQL query to save this data to the database. So for that, I'm going to create a variable called SQL and then write a query inside here. So we're going to insert into table name which is task. The fields are going to be title and description, and the values are going to be okay. Now what we're going to do is we need to execute this query, and if the query is successfully executed, we need to save a success message in the session. Otherwise we need to throw an exception and save that exception to the session. So first what we need to do is we need to check if a session is already defined. If it's not defined, we need to define a session. So it's very easy. We can go to the database.php file and copy this line and come back over here and paste it. Okay, now this will check if there's already a session defined. If there is no session, just start a new one. Okay, now what we can do is execute this function, execute this query. Okay, now if this returns true, what we can do is we can save the message in the session inside the success equal to task created successfully. Okay, and we can redirect the user back to the index.php file. For that we need to call the header function, header. Okay, and that inside here I'm going to call the location, well, index.php. okay, and then we can write the call the exit function. Okay, that's it. So in case if the query failed, what we can do is we need to handle that condition. So if the query is failed, we need to throw a new exception. I'm going to give error creating task, and I'm going to throw the error. Okay, now we are throwing a lot of exceptions over here. So what we need to do is we need to catch that exception and store it in a session, so that we can show that exception as an alert to the user. So for that I'm going to use the catch. Okay, inside this I'm going to store the error inside a session. Okay, so that's it. And there is one last step that we need to do. We need to validate this form from the front end before sending it to the server. Okay, so for that we need to define a JavaScript function for validating. So we can go to the script.js file inside the JS folder, and we can start an event listener. So document.add event listener, and when the content is loaded, so DOM content loaded, I need to call a function. Okay, on inside over here we can create a variable called const. Task variable will be called task forms. Right, this is going to select all the elements with the class name, all. Like the one that we gave over here, we're going to select this form. Okay, needs validation. Okay, and first what we need to do is we need to check if this form exists. If task forms, then we need to for each through all the input elements in this form and validate each input element. So for that I'm going to task form dot for each. Okay, for each form. We need to add an event listener in these forms. So add event listener, and if the user submits the form, we need to call a function. Okay, so in this function will check, will validate. Okay, so if the form dot check validity function. So okay, if the form is not valid, what we can do is we can prevent it from submitting. So event dot prevent default. And the other thing that we need to do is we need to prevent the validation of the other input field. So stop propagation also. Okay, call both of this. Okay, now that our form validation is completed, lastly what we need to do is we need to create an alert system to show these error messages and success messages that we have stored in the session to the user. Okay, so for that we might need this alert in all the pages. So we're going to create a new PHP file in the includes folder, and we're going to call it alerts.php, and we'll include this alert in the header so that it will be available in all pages. First I'm going to start a PHP tag here. Inside this PHP tag, first thing that we need to do is we need to make sure if a session is already started, otherwise we need to start a session. So for that, if not is set. If a session is not already started, just start by using the session start function. Okay, now the session will be started. Okay, now what we need to do is we need to create alerts for different kinds of errors or success alerts, etc. So for that, what we can do is we can check if a success alert exists in the session. So if is set session of success. If this exists, what we need to do is we need to echo out an alert, a success alert. Okay, go inside this. I'm going to go to the Get Bootstrap website and copy a Bootstrap 5 alert. So just come over here, go to the component section and click on these alerts and scroll down. Okay, you see this alert with a cross. Just copy this and come back and paste it over here. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of this message. Okay, and since this is a success message, I'm going to show success. So inside this alert, I'm going to print the message. So all we have to do is we need to copy this and paste it over here. Okay, so that will be it. We can now, after we have shown the alert to the user, what we can do is we can just unset this session, unset the success message. Okay, so that we can store another success message in this key. Okay, so similarly what we can do is we can just copy this and create one for error messages. So this is also going to be error here also. Okay, so that's it. And for if you want, we can create two more, one for warning alerts and another for just information alerts. So far we haven't given such alerts, but we can create them for just in case. So for warning, and one for information. So okay, that's it. Now what we can do is we can create an event listener which will automatically dismiss this alert after 5 seconds. So for that, go to this script, and inside this, what we can do is we can create another event listener. So for that, I'm going to give const alerts equal to document dot get element, and document dot query selector all. You need to select all kinds of alerts, and these alerts will have a class name of alert. This is this one. Just copy this over and paste it over just in case of spelling mistakes. Okay. Next, what we need to do is we need to forage through these alerts and create a timeout function. So for that, alerts.forEach. Inside here, what we can do is we can create a set timeout, and in this timeout I'm going to create a function, and here I'm going to set the logic for automatically dismissing. So const bs alert equal to new bootstrap dot alert of alert. Okay, this alert, and bs dot close. Okay, so this event listener will close all the alerts that is created, and we don't want to close it instantly, we want to close it after a timeout of 5 seconds. So for that, it's going to give a 5000 over here. Okay, so that's it. Now what we need to do is we need to include this alert in the header.php. So for that, I'm going to come over here, copy this include once, and go to the header.php, and after the container, you can paste this over here. Okay, instead of this header, I'm going to give alert.php. Now what we can do is we can test our project. So if we come back and okay, refresh, go to add new task, create a new task, and for the description. Okay, now if we create task, you can see that task created successfully is showing over here, and our the alert got dismissed automatically after 5 seconds, and we can see a new task over here. So that's it, we have successfully completed the create operation in the CRUD, and next we can move on to the update and delete.